Lord willing, this will work. Okay. We are going through the lower Galilee today. Do you see a capital E on that map by any chance? See the outline forming a capital E with the middle section going towards Jerusalem? Okay, keep that in mind as we go. We're going to be traveling from the top of that E to the center of the E with this day's travel. We are looking at a map of the 1948 boundaries when the UN voted to give Israel a nation. And these were the boundaries that were roughly drawn. They made this capital E. See that narrow little isthmus that goes to Jerusalem right there in the middle? There was only one road that went there. They were already fighting before the UN vote. So this is a choke point. This is a point in which strategically it was critical in order to supply the old quarter in Jerusalem where we're going to be staying for food, hospital supplies, ammunition, things of that nature. We talked about how this whole seacoast was planted in oranges, Jaffa oranges. We talked about how the upper portion up here, particularly this portion right here, is called the Jezreel Valley. And that is highly fertile. I mean, very, very strong agricultural, fruitful land, fertile land. So the Jews had bought this section up from 1900 onward. That was the Zionist movement. So that was their land, purchasing it from absentee Arab landowners and then building it, improving it, settling in it. And this is why the boundaries up here in the northern Galilee, where we will be the day before, November the 24th, we will have been all the way up to Dan up here at the top. Remember the description geographically in the Old Testament from Dan to Beersheba, right down here, top to bottom, Dan to Beersheba. That was a common Old Testament saying to include all of the boundary of Israel. Down here in the southern, we will have already been through it, but we're heading to Jerusalem today on this day, but we're cutting through this valley, leaving the Sea of Galilee and the youth hostel, which is right there on that right-hand portion right here. And we were coming along this highway right here, due west, past Mount Tabor, past Cana, where Jesus did his first miracle, to Nazareth, where he grew up. Okay, this is his childhood home here in Nazareth. Then from Nazareth, we're going to look across the Jezreel Valley from a high vantage point. And you're going to see Megiddo, which is the #1 populous city throughout Old Testament Israel. It's a walled city. It's huge. We're not going to it, but you can see it. They've got a spring, a well in the center of the city that's 150 feet down. And you just walk down a spiral staircase to get there. And it's water from a channel that comes from outside the city wall, 200 yards away. And there's a tunnel underground that whole way that you can walk until you get outside the city walls itself of Megiddo. Famous place where Solomon kept his chariots and horses and things of that nature. And then we're going to go to Mount Carmel. We're not going to go up it. There's nothing up top except a a Catholic facility, it's pretty difficult parking. So we may just get up on the mountain so that you get a sense of where it is. And you can see it overlooks the Mediterranean Ocean. See how close we are to the Mediterranean here? Well, we're going right down here. You see Caesarea Maritima down here on the coast. Number one Roman city in all of Israel. Forget Jerusalem, forget Caesarea Philippi, where we went the day before. This is huge. Herod built a port that rivaled Rome. There was no other port in all of the Roman Empire that really came close to matching what Herod built at Caesarea Maritima. There were amphitheaters, there were chariot tracks to race in the forums. There were massive works. There were fancy homes all over the place. So this is where Pilate lived, except when he had to visit Jerusalem to keep the peace. This is his home. All of the Roman procurators were down here in Caesarea where the palaces were. Herod, this is where Paul had his trial before Herod and whoever was the Roman guy at the time, Festus, he was a Jew. Anyway, we're coming directly west, hit the coast, and coming down the coast, and then we're coming in through that narrow isthmus into Jerusalem. This is Mount Tabor from 1900. It is the reputed site of Jesus's transfiguration, the Mount of Transfiguration. And this is what the Lord would have seen outside his front porch in Nazareth. Nazareth is up on a mountain of its own, and it's a ridge line. Nazareth is good temperature, temperate environment, and here's his view. Him and his brothers. You could see them at some point racing each other to the top of the mountain. I mean, this is their neighborhood. This is the city of Nazareth overlooking Cana and Mount Tabor to the left. If you look to the right, you see the Jezreel Valley and Mount Carmel. In other words, Jesus was presented with where Elijah defeated the prophets of Baal, looking right out his front door. Or here's Nazareth on the hilltop. He would see Mount Tabor. These were the two features. Now, what's unique about this valley, Megiddo is over on the left, extreme top left of the picture over here. The fields of Megiddo, or the plain of Megiddo, is called Armageddon, from which we get in Revelation Armageddon. The Battle of Armageddon is right here. This is the location that we're going to be having a wonderful view of. That's Mount Carmel. And you can see it's starting to get hilly. And then we come to the seashore. Caesarea Maritima is down here. See where this spit comes out right here? Behind it is the port. We are going to stop here. And anybody that wants to, and I recommend everybody, we get out of the parking lot, you take your picturesque spot. This is the aqueduct, 25 miles long, that brought the water from Mount Carmel down to Caesarea Maritima. Okay, the Roman aqueduct, still there. This beach is littered with pottery, ancient pottery, Byzantine pottery, you name it. It's the trash dump was the ocean. And so things, shipwrecks, they're finding things all the time, snorkeling right off here. They found a buried treasure of gold that you'll see in Caesarea Maritima, right here, outside where the ships would dock in the harbor. But it was from the Byzantine time, not from the biblical time, New Testament time. We're going to walk right down this deserted coastline, this deserted beach. Dip your feet in the waves, kick your toes, sink them in the sand. And what we're going to walk by, here's the aqueduct up here, but all along here are old pieces of pottery washing from the sea or back into the sea. And when I say back into the sea, just over the lip of these rocks is the beach. And we're going to be walking along that beach, but these are Roman villas. They're mosaic floors that are washing into the ocean. I mean, ever heard of a tessera? It's a little trapezoidal rectangular square that they use in the mosaic floors. And you've got whole sections of floor tumbling into the ocean. Now, make up your mind how you're going to handle this. I'm going to tell you the legal side of it. Legal side of it is these are antiquities, and you're not supposed to pick up antiquities ever, anywhere, and they're everywhere. You can't hike, you can't walk on a path, you can't do anything without coming across a worn piece of pottery. You go to the beach, put your beach umbrella down, and it hits 4 or 5 pieces of pottery from all ages, all ages. So my kids scooped up a basket full of them. When you're leaving, they ask you, are you taking anything with you? We told them pottery every time we've been, and they said, and you go get on your plane. The legal thing is you're not supposed to pick up anything. So use your own discretion. You can buy antiquities at various shops and other places. Some of them are approved, some of them aren't. And the one, Emery can tell you how dicey it can be in Jerusalem and elsewhere. Where'd you buy your stuff? In Jerusalem at some of the suggested shops. Yeah. They'll tell you real quick in the antiquity shops that they are approved by Dallas Theological Seminary or various and sundry. They'll ascertain what kind of flavor of Christian you are, and then they know they're Christians, believe me. You got to be careful. Yeah, I had a friend who paid $100 for a little lamp that you can buy for $1 at Nazareth, where we're going. So just be careful, about anything they tell you or anything they say. Ideally, most of those shops in Jerusalem are approved and have antiquity licenses, and they have the stuff, as you said, on the counter or in the window on the counter, and then under the counter in shoe boxes. And when you get to the shoe box level, you're in trouble, because that's when the prices go astronomical. So we'll be walking down this coast. It's a really unique opportunity. No other tours do this. As we walk around the spit here, or across and over it, and come down into the parking lot of Caesarea. Now, you'll see the port wall that Herod built, and it's a breakwater now. But down underneath, there are solid square blocks of sandstone or granite, forget what it is. But it circles the area and it comes back here, and it forms a beautiful enclosed harbor. There will be models of this, maps of it, and that kind of thing. This gives you a little bit of idea how it came out and wrapped around These are restaurants. Don't know. I mean, I was talking with Brad Brown this week, and I said, "Look, who's going to fine tune this schedule?" And he said, "Let me look." So he pulled up our tour, and we have a not Palestinian. Let me change that. An Arab Christian by the name of Josh Judah, who's going to be traveling with us as our guide. He's the one that's assigned right now. I'm going to be working with him on the itinerary every evening so that we can figure out what we can hit the next day out of our wish list of top items. And one of them was, and I need to hear from you, is last year, or the last time we went, we took a trip into a reconstructed Jewish village from the time of Christ. In other words, it's a tourist place, but it's built around old ruins. And they have restored a house to a Jewish home of the first century, a Jewish grist mill, a wine press. They show you the sleeping areas, where the animals were stabled and stuff like that. You get an experience. They also do that in Nazareth. The one in Nazareth is evangelical, and it recreates the Jewish countryside, including a Jewish synagogue that you can go in that's been fully reconstructed, and you get a tour of what goes on in the synagogue. When you're done with this 1.5 hour tour, you can go in and eat in their cafeteria, or we can press on to the coast and eat a late lunch here. You tell me how important it is to go to one of those experiences, because if you want to go, we'll go, but we may go to the less traveled one the day before so that we don't have to go into Nazareth because of the traffic. The traffic is horrendous. Narrow streets, the buses have fits, there's never any parking. They can let us out at the door and we can you usually have to wait sometimes half an hour, 40 minutes for the tour to start because they've got to clear the group in front of you. So you guys let me know what you want to do and we'll do that. Be thinking about it. No decision has to be made now. But we ate here last trip. Anybody recognize anything there? That's lamb on the skewers. What are those pink things? Pomegranates? Yeah, that would make sense. Okay. And then they serve this for yeah. Shrimp pasta. I mean, this is an idea of some of the meals and food. And then for dessert, anybody know what that is? Doesn't look too appealing to me. Ice cream, cucumber ice cream. I did. I finished it. Yeah. I mean, it's made with sweet cream. And I got no idea. It was cold. I was hot. And it went down. What the Lord feeds me, I will swallow. All right. Here we are. We've come due west through the Jezreel Valley to Mount Carmel, stopping at Nazareth along the way. We are going to go to the precipice where the crowd was wanting to throw Jesus over the cliff. It may not be the actual one, but close enough to get by. I mean, it's just a beautiful tourist place to stop and get the lay of the land, see Nazareth and whole nine. Now we're coming from right here, through Tel Aviv, past Jaffa, down to the freeway that goes into Jerusalem. That freeway wasn't there the first 3 times I went to Israel. You had to go on a narrow 2-lane road to approach Jerusalem. That was the main thoroughfare. Now there's a nice 4-lane road that carries you past everything. And I'm going to take a moment here and bring you up to speed on some of the nuances we're going to encounter, including with our bus driver and our guide. This is things we need to be aware of. Past Tel Aviv and Jaffa, where the plane lands right here, we're going to come up this way, the ascent into Jerusalem. Because remember, you're coming from sea level up 1,500 feet, 2,000 feet to Jerusalem. And the ridge line that runs, here's Shiloh. This is where we're going a few days from here. Once we reach Jerusalem, this is where the tabernacle was for 360 years. Then we're going to go down into Judah. Now, I'm going to try to get all of that next lesson that we have, which would be August 13th, be the last class, because the core starts after that. I can still put all the notes together if you want to look up, see where we're going, get the biblical texts, that kind of thing. This is what you will see, and this is what confronted every visitor to Jerusalem on the narrow highway before the superhighway was built. Bab al-Wad. These are the remains of burned out armored vehicles that were ambushed on the way to Jerusalem to bring hospital supplies, doctors, nurses, and there were some teenage girls along. They were massacred, every one of them, at Bab al-Wad. I told you the story about how the Jews from the 1890s, Zionism bought up the land around Nazareth, around Mount Tabor, and they began putting in farmland. In 1917, the famous Balfour Declaration was made. His Majesty's government view with favor the establishment in Palestine of a national home for the Jewish people, and will use their best endeavors to facilitate the achievement of this object, it being clearly understood that nothing shall be done which may prejudice the civil and religious rights of existing non-Jewish communities in Palestine, or the rights and political status enjoyed by Jews in any other country. There was only 3 to 5% of the total Israel population in Israel at the time was Jewish. So when they declared this, it was 3 years after the British Empire declared war on the Ottoman Empire that controlled all of the area and the region. So it was kind of tweaking the nose of the Arabs, Ottoman Empire, in order to have Jews support the British war effort. But it became the Declaration of Independence for all of Judaism anywhere in the world. They saw this as their hope of a promised land. Now, they were quickly buying up land, and they were doing so legally, but it was from absentee Arab owners who wanted to make a buck off of land that they couldn't get anything out of. This was the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Balfour, and representing the king's government in that capacity. They wrote this and published it worldwide. And it did as it was expected. It brought Jews from all over the world to support this declaration and therefore the settlements, Zionist settlements in northern Galilee and down the western coastline. Don't know my British history that well. The Brit after the war, the whole place, the whole Middle East was divvied up. French got Lebanon. Forget who got Syria. Israel was given to the British. So they became the protectorates of all parties in that land. And as a result, it was okay for Jews to buy land and resettle and have boundaries for the first time ever. In 2,000 years, there were boundaries like the E I showed you at the beginning. They're here and they are displacing land squatters or Palestinians who have no ties to the land. They were Egyptian deserters coming from the Egyptian army. They were made up of a hodgepodge of people. The Arabs that lived here, though, were the original settlers of the area, along with a handful of 3% Jews that had stayed here 2,000 years. So there were legitimate Arabs here. And if you wanted their land, you had to pay for it. And if they sold it to you, the Jews of the world would develop that land. So the Arabs in the area didn't have the resources to develop, and they saw they weren't getting any help from their Arab friends, so they sold to the Jews, who did receive help from outside. Zionism as a movement. It would be like the declaration that this land would be given to Mexico. If, Hispanic, it didn't matter. It was unlimited immigration into Israel is what the Balfour Declaration guaranteed. Unlimited. And the Arabs absolutely objected all over the world to this. And this is where the battle lines were in 1948. Jewish convoys from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. It's the only means of getting food, hospital supplies. They had a huge hospital in Jerusalem at the time. And they had the old quarter. Now, here's one of the things you're going to see, and we'll explain it at the end, is the four quarters of old Jerusalem. Christian quarter, Jewish quarter, Armenian quarter, Muslim quarter. Okay. 3 different religions representing 4 groups. Which one double dipped? No, they only had 1 quarter. Armenian and the Christian. They were all Christians, representing different streams of Christianity. But over half the city of Jerusalem prior to this time was Christian. It's an interesting fact. Here's the road going in as a lifeline to Jerusalem. 4 days before the massacre on Bab el-Wad, this happened. The village of Deir Yassin, right here. The Jews needed a new way into Jerusalem. There were donkey cart pathways that went through this village. But this was a bottleneck, and, it was dangerous. The convoys that had to thread that needle to get supplies into Jerusalem, and Jerusalem hung by a thread. Starvation, lack of ammunition to defend themselves, you name it. This was the village of Deir Yassin, Arabs, peacefully owning the land and living with their Jewish counterparts, when two elements, the Stern Gang and the Irgun of the Israeli army, and these are the stormtroopers, these are the bad guys. We would not like them, okay? Came into this village and leveled it. They gave, accordingly, supposedly, a bullhorn that said, evacuate your homes or in half an hour, we're going to level. And in half an hour, they leveled them. Men, women, children. It was just a massacre. And these two guys led the two elements that went in, Menachem and Yitzhak Shamir. Ever heard of them? What office did they hold? Huh? You got it. What Netanyahu holds today, they each held respectively. The Israelis elected these guys to be like Himmler and the head of the SS or what have you. Is there any wonder there's problems in Israel? I mean, the culture is an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. That is the justice system of Israel. With the coming of Christ, love your enemy, forgive your brother 70 times 7. That concept is foreign to an Old Testament mindset Jew that's based on that. And nothing is more apparent than the way they operate their army and so on and so forth. 76 Jewish children, nurses, and doctors were massacred at this choke point 5 days after the Arab village of Yassin was leveled and the people killed there. The Arabs and the Palestinians call it the great tragedy or the terrible event, referencing the massacre at the village. They call it the Holocaust. And the two sides have used these two events 5 days apart from the beginning of Israel's becoming a nation. Just a month later. In other words, 1 month after these events took place, you have the nation of Israel struggling for its life in every way. The only way the siege of Jerusalem was lifted was by building a brand new road that heavy equipment could travel on. And it went through the village, Yassin. And here you see the bulldozer right here, taking these donkey paths that were steep and everything else, literally in 2 days' time, building over a mountain pass and linking up with some of the outside the walls highways of Jerusalem proper that had no way to connect to the coast until this new road, Burma Road, was actually built. And it, the Arabs were looting the old city at the time because the Jews were out of ammunition. Christians were caught in the middle. Many of these Arabs are Christians, looting their Jewish neighbors in the old city. On April 23rd, 1948, the siege was lifted when the first convoys arrived with food and ammunition and so forth. And apart from this event, there would not be Israel as a nation as we know it today. State of Israel was born May 14th, 1948, a month later after the massacres. You can see down here, Egyptian Air Force Spitfires bombed Tel Aviv, 1 shot down. I mean, it's a miracle they were able to shoot any of them down with the pea shooters that they had. They had no anti-aircraft, anything. U.S. recognizes the Jewish state. they almost rescinded their recognition. Another month or two would go past and it hung in the balance. So you can't even, these things are known by people from 1948 on in Israel, both Arab and Jewish. Now, when we talk about Arabs, there are two cities in Israel that are primarily Christian. Can you guess which two they were? I say was. I mean, it's true. It's past tense. When I first started going over in the 1980s, early 80s, there were two absolute majority Christian cities. Nope. What would we revere? Bethlehem was one of them. Nazareth was the other. Bethlehem and Nazareth held the majority Christian population in all of Israel, but they were primarily Arabs, Arab Christians. Okay. Families who had lived there for generations, who dealt with the Jews all the time, with the love of Christ supposedly controlling, they were able to live in harmony with their Muslim neighbors when they could. When Israel was born, there's another group added to the mix: Jews, Muslims, and Christian Arabs. Our bus driver and our guide are probably in that middle group of Christian Arabs. They have virtually disappeared in the last 25 years. They are no longer the majority in either Nazareth or Bethlehem. Their whole Christian quarter inside Jerusalem, the old city walls, gone. The Christians called the Christian quarter is now mostly taken up by Orthodox and Catholic churches and monasteries and things of that nature. The people that have resided there as Christians for centuries are gone. They were caught between the rock and the hard place. I mean, I had friends in Bethlehem who ran a handicraft shop downtown Bethlehem, a block off of what they call Manger Square. And he became a friend. I mean, every time I visited, he'd be there. We'd go to his house for dinner, do whatever. He's gone. He had to shut down his shop when the Jewish soldiers came in, accused him of Palestinian terrorism as a Christian Arab, tore up his shop, demolished his uncle's shop with crystals all over the place, beautiful crystal shop. They can't conduct business. They were literally forced out by the conflict between the Palestinian Arab Muslims and the Jewish culture. There's no place for them. They've relocated here in the States and throughout Europe, evidently, but it's sad that this has happened. And, I've watched it over a period of time. That was in the 80s when I went there. The Intifada started when I was in Bethlehem. It's when Gaddafi was bombed by Ronald Reagan. And we would all sit like this in the lobby of the hotel in downtown Bethlehem. The Arab Christian owners would be behind the desk like this, and we'd all be cheering, all the Americans on the dig. It was tragic. And then they started marching in the streets of Bethlehem, and that's the beginning of the Intifada. I saw it passing by the front door and wondered who these people were and what they were marching about. And that's when we found out Reagan had bombed Gaddafi and bombed his palace. We're on our way up through, and the only way you're going to see these bombed out vehicles is if you look to your right real quickly, or you're not going to see them. They used to be prominent because they put them where everybody had to see them, to remind everybody that Jewish massacre, the massacre of the Jews on the Bab el Wad Road. There is going to be another event just as we come into Jerusalem. You know, the village of Emmaus is real close to Jerusalem. Just before you get to the village of Emmaus, they've got the most famous high place in Israel. What did we say a high place was? They worshiped idols on that high place. You can see this from the roadway, the superhighway. Elvis in an American diner at Nevi Elon. No lie. When I was speaking at this event at a conference, another conference, and boom, there he was. I had to get gas in my car, and it's a great place to stop and get gas. You go inside, and it's all Elvis memorabilia, floor to ceiling. So it is the most famous high place in all of Israel. You ask people now, they all know where the Elvis statue is. And then we round the corner. You can definitely get your fill of Elvis music, which is playing quite loudly throughout. We're coming in, the highway comes up this valley right here, and it circles around and dumps us off, and here's the hotel right here. So you can see we're going to be in the heart of the old city of Jerusalem. This is the Gloria Hotel. Don't judge a book by its cover. I mean, everything is narrow alleyways. They can barely get a golf cart through some of these. They'll be picking up our luggage and literally on a small tractor, bringing it from the underground garage up a back way and into the area right here. This is just a gathering place, and there's a grotto that Grace Fellowship appropriated for evening get-togethers, you know, after dinner talks, sings, what have you. We don't yet have anybody leading us singing-wise on this group, so if anybody wants to volunteer, that's great. We had Jim and Vicky with us last time, and that was fantastic. Here's where it is. It's on the west side of the city by the Jaffa Gate that points towards the Mediterranean Ocean. So if you're looking this way, you're looking towards the Mediterranean through the Jaffa Gate. We're literally just inside, and this is one of those alleyways here. And here's the hotel, and it takes up a section of this brown space here. I can't guarantee that you're going to get any kind of size on a room. Everything in the old city is at a premium. So the rooms are compact. You open the door, there's your bed, there's the restroom, end of story. So as far as amenities and everything else, it has all the standard types of things. But we got bumped from Knight's Palace where we were booked, and that can happen again. Just be aware that nothing is written in stone because they do all kinds of shenanigans. I've been bumped twice now on secure hotel reservations, and they don't give you any rhyme or reason. They just give you an alternative or sleep in the streets. So it's something that we hopefully, working with Signature, who is a large tour company, that won't be a problem at all. But look how close we are to the Temple Mount. See the Temple Mount here, the Dome of the Rock? It's just right down the main drag, right to the Wailing Wall. You can, half a mile? This is the Via Dolorosa. Here's the Antonio Fortress where Pilate judged Jesus, whipped him. You go down carrying the cross, the stations of the cross, if you're Catholic, until you get down here, and he was crucified, supposedly, right here outside the old gate, and was buried in the church basement of the Holy Sepulchre. Go to it on your free time. I mean, it's worth seeing. Although where we're going is right here. This is the Garden Tomb. Outside the city walls along the main roadway up here. Everything is within good walking distance. See what it says right here? Christian Quarter. Okay, the Christian Quarter begins up here, comes down here, and goes right to the Jaffa Gate, right here. This is the Christian Quarter where the Gloria Hotel is. Down below it is the Armenian Quarter. Down here is the Jewish Quarter. And up here is the Muslim Quarter. So when you're walking around, traveling around, try not to get up into this neighborhood up here. I mean, I've been up there. It was fine, but that was back in the early 80s. There's been a lot of water under the dam since then. So. You don't want to get in a back alley, and there are two dangers. There's criminal activity, but there's also religious activity. The two active groups are the Muslims against Jews. And if you got caught in the area and they thought you were a Jew, that would be bad. And then there's the Jewish Orthodox extremists against Christians. And if you've been following the news, there's been an outbreak of Christian persecution at the Wailing Wall. Not persecution, it's been a shouting match. The police kept order, but the Orthodox have been growing much more bold in their denunciation of Christians, anything. They tried to take over the Christian Quarter. They did take over some of the Armenian Quarter and just appropriated the property in between back during the British protectorate. So there's ill feelings depending on which section of the city you're in, but this Via Dolorosa, all of this down below, all the way down, is okay. You get down to a couple mosques down here, but they're just simply historically there, and Muslims are allowed access to them just like we would be to these areas up here if you're Armenian. Any questions on? Did you see the news article last week on that? Yeah, the Messianic Jews were holding a praise meeting down in the city, and the Orthodox Jews came. And I mean, we're talking one element of Orthodox Jews, not all, one extremist element, kind of like the Proud Boys or white supremacist group. They've got their supremacist group, and they're active. They were outlawed as a party in the political process up until the last two elections. That tells you how radical they are. And now they're just with impunity going, and they find a Christian activity like a worship conference and they'll block it. Yeah. The ones with the curlicues, and there's a me get my bearings here. Yeah, west, outside the city. There is on the way to Bethlehem, there is a neighborhood called Misharim. Misharim, you do not drive on a Friday evening or a Saturday, or they will tip over your car. They will surround you and tip over your car because you're breaking the Sabbath. Doesn't matter who you are. Everybody in the area knows you don't drive through that neighborhood. That's where they're from. They're ultra Orthodox. And they've been showing up down at the Wailing Wall down here. And there is a railing right here. You can go to the Wailing Wall. They've got a men's section and a women's section. And they've got a mixed section, which is an abomination in Jewish law. And the day they opened the men and women's section, one of the big, huge blocks of the wall fell out, coming crashing down on the people who were holding the inaugural, it was kind of the Jewish version of wokeness, men and women together, and that was taboo. And that block came down, and it was a sign to the ultra-Orthodox that God was condemning what they had condemned. And you can see that rock now. I mean, you see the hole where it came out. So it was a fascinating providence, interesting. Here's where you would go down underground. There's a whole series of tunnels down here underneath the Western Wall. And that's the part you have to reserve beforehand if you want to go on your day off. You enter, you go to the Wailing Wall from our hotel, you walk right down the road, and you enter here. They've got a synagogue right here, and you have to walk through the synagogue, and that synagogue is supposed to be open to all. There's been some, the police keep order, believe me. That's not going to be a problem. But there was some shouting going on from the ultra-Orthodox towards some and I inappropriately dressed tourists, Christian tourists. So when we get into this area, and particularly on the Dome of the Rock, you've got to be careful about being modestly dressed. Any other questions? No class next week, and Lord willing, we'll try to cover all of the Jerusalem itself is a 3-class session. We're not going to be able to do it. We're going to be going down underneath Jerusalem through Hezekiah's tunnels. There's 2 of them. We're going to be going into the city of David, Mount Zion, which is just right here out the Jaffa Gate. This is the beginning of Mount Zion right here in the bottom left-hand corner. It's lower than the threshing floor of Aruna, which was up here where they built the temple. David bought the land from Aruna. He kept the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant in a tent down here in the city of David. The city of David is called Mount Zion. So we're going to be thoroughly exploring Zion. Lots of steps going up and down. Down all the way to the Pool of Siloam, where they recently excavated it and found it to be, instead of just 3 steps and a small pool, it's a 1-acre size pool. 1 acre, paved and filled with water during Jesus' time. And it's where 100,000 Jews would ritually use it as a mikvah. Remember how we talked about mikvah last week? Before they ascended to the Mount of God, up this roadway right here. I'm sorry, came up from right here and comes out right here, and they'd go up to the Temple. So we'll be doing all of that, and that's a full day in itself, ending up coming down to Via Dolorosa and then back to the hotel. It's enough to whet your appetite and get your bearings for the streets of Jerusalem. And anywhere down in this area, you're finding there's shopping galore, narrow alleyways around every nook and cranny, and just wonderful experience. The various stations of the cross. How many are there? 7? 11? I don't know. As
far as I was thinking shorts are okay before you get to the road school.
That would probably be a good rule of thumb. Yeah. All right. Let's pray. Father, I thank you for this time together, and I thank you, Lord, that you have given us a great opportunity to see your word unfold in front of us. And Father, I pray that's what it would be. Landmark occasion in our lives, that we would be able to appreciate you more, see the places, go where the Lord went, see the locations of the events that took place. And I pray, Lord, that our faith would not just be strengthened, that it would be expanded in very unique ways that would last us for a lifetime. We just pray towards this end. In Jesus' name, amen.
Thank you, Dan.
See you, Elena. Any questions on your end?
Actually, no, but I was thinking about coming to visit one of these.
Well, August 13th will be our last class.
Okay.
So, and we're not doing it next week. So
I saw that. Okay.
We got a church event that's taking up that slot. So love to have you. Love to.
Yeah, I think it'd be great to meet at least once in person before we go.
Well, you know what we may do is talk about doing that at a later date. Just have a weekend get together on a Saturday or something.
That sounds great.
We can get everybody, including the Ryans, who I haven't met yet. Okay, all right. Well, good seeing you and hearing from you. Were you able to see the slides this time?
Yes, this time I saw them. I think there was 2 weeks ago when I couldn't, but I didn't want to interrupt.
Well, that's an answer to prayer. We've been practicing with technology. It's been on and again, off again. Had to uninstall the software to get it to work.
Yeah, no, today was perfect. I saw it great. I could actually expand the pictures on Zoom, which I didn't realize we could do.
Oh, good.
Yeah, so it was great. It was